All right, so this project is going to entail UIUX. So what UIUX stands for is user interface, user experience. So we're going to get into mobile interface design. Now we're working with total editorial design on this. So it's not a tool app that we're going to be creating here. We're not going to be finding locations near you or anything like that. We're strictly designing an editorial publication, a magazine concept that we are creating a mobile app version of that publication. So part of this idea here is to understand magazines and editorial design and how that transitions from print layout to mobile or digital layout. And most magazines today, by and large, have all platforms, their print publications, their websites, and have mobile apps of their publications. There are very few that still are just print only. And there are some magazines out there that don't have a print component. They just have digital magazines. They have a website and a mobile app. So you find a little bit of that across the board. But for the most part, most magazines these days have all three or on all three platforms. So before the pandemic, we had the print component of this as a major project as well. But we decided after COVID hit, it was just a little bit too much in a shortened semester to have both of the print and the mobile app components as major projects. So we took the print component out as a major project, but we are going to have a minor project next week where you do learn some of the print components and layout for editorial design. So we will still have something similar just as a minor project. We're just going to condense it down and have it be a little less rigorous in terms of the print component. We're going to mainly focus on the UI UX. So I'm going to share the actual assignment with you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be posting all this in Blackboard as well, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the assignment so you can go along with me here. So, I'm going to be giving you sample articles to choose from. So I'm going to give you 3 and you'll choose one of these stories. And this sample story is going to act as your publication's feature story of the particular issue that we're going to be designing. So from after you choose your article, your feature story, you'll then conceptualize your magazine name and brand, which includes, your branded typefaces, you'll have to come up with a logo or a nameplate, how that's going to look. And so that's the conceptual challenge here is you've got to come up with a magazine brand for this. And this will hold your feature story for this particular issue that we're going to be designing. So you will be researching and conceptualizing all of this before designing the interface and the navigation and everything of your publications app. So we do have to imagine your magazine brand being in print as well as an online or mobile publication. So the big thing here is keeping in mind that this is strictly an editorial design. This is not a tool app. So just keep that in mind throughout this. So as far as the design and functionality here, we're going to have several sections. We're not designing the entire app, but we are going to design the appearance and functionality. We're going to have the phone screen with your magazine icon which is basically your app. You know, Apple calls it a widget, but the little square on your phone that you click onto to get into the mobile app. You'll be designing the phone screen and what your mobile app icon looks like. We'll be designing the primary home page of the magazine app. So the primary navigation. And then we're going to be also designing the secondary or hidden navigation. So basically what that is if we click on the hamburger stack or the secondary menu, those options. And then we're going to design the article. You know, you'll have other articles in this issue. You'll make those up. But we're going to, you know, design the primary navigation views, including your feature story. Then we're going to also design the feature story and its layout with all of its components. And so that's the thing that you're going to have to learn about with this project is the architecture of an editorial design. You know, that includes a main header, a deck, byline, drop cap, the entire, you know, story itself, images, captions. These stories will have a pull quote and sidebar content related to the article. So we'll go over what those terms mean, and I'll show you some examples here shortly. So we'll be designing the feature story with all of its extensions, including its sidebar content, and then the navigation to and from the feature article in the app. So that's the primary things that we'll be designing for your app. And the important thing here is, you know, we'll be designing all of this on paper first. So this is, you know, this as far as research and preparation for this is focusing on human-centered design. You've got to think about your research and exploration from a end user's perspective. In other words, you've got to think about the action and the result of that action of anybody reading your magazine app or looking at your publication. So you've got to understand their needs, their motivations, you know, their habits of your demographic, you know, things like that will help you create effective solutions for all of these design elements. So we're going to look at some magazine mobile apps and see how the functionality works. But before we do anything digital, we'll be doing sketching and creating what is technically the lo-fi prototype, which is what we call wireframing. In this particular context, it's very similar to storyboards because it's creating a sequence of sketches to show progression. And I'm going to provide you a template with that. So we'll be working out the design and the usability on paper before we start anything digitally. So, so you'll have opportunities, you know, to design if it's a scrolling page, what that looks like and that sort of thing. So, and I provided this is not a magazine prototype, but this gives you, I provided a link in the assignment sheet that shows you what prototyping and testing a low fidelity prototype might look like, so you can get a grasp of how raw it is. But it also gives you an idea of, you know, when you're testing your low fidelity prototype or your sketches and thinking of how that works with people that would be reading or using your publication app. You know, this gives you an idea of how you would have to change the design if there was any confusion or if there was any pause to where people didn't know where to go or didn't know what to click on, you know, how that's a design problem and how that needs to be fixed. So once we've done the paper part and the low fidelity prototyping, we'll design the screens for your app in InDesign. And then once we want to add the interactivity, that's when we save those screens as JPEGs and then we upload them into InVision. And so InVision is our industry standard high fidelity prototyping program. It's a free program. I gave you all the information on that in the Start Here page at the beginning of the year in Blackboard. So you'll have to get an account, you know, start your educational account, and that way you can create your high fidelity prototype. This is where we will add all the interactivity. So it allows us to do that without actually adding code. And this is a free app you can get on your phone as well. So once you've created your high fidelity prototype of your app, you can actually pull it up on your phone and test it on people, which is pretty cool. So that's the general side of the UI UX. This is essentially the major project. But I want to show you kind of what we're talking about here. So the magazine that I'm about to show you here is Via Corsa. It's a sports car magazine. So this is the print version of this magazine. So I want you to kind of see how things can go from print to mobile. So the Via Corsa here, this is the cover of the magazine. So you can see the branding elements here. They use a bright red. They have a pinstripe with a block, a pinstripe next to the V. And you know, we have cover lines on the cover of the magazine, and these cover lines represent the top stories of this particular issue. This is a March issue here. So you do have to think about like how often your publication is distributed. You know, is this a monthly publication? Is this the weekly publication? Is this a bi-monthly, yearly? You know, you've got to think about how often you would be distributing issues here. And so these cover lines are just a preview of what's in this particular issue, in the March issue. So we're going to jump. Usually the feature article is in the middle of a magazine. So the feature article here, now this is in page view. This is actually a double page spread. So this is the left page and this is the right page. So it's kind of connected. It was technically a double page spread, as if we were looking at the magazine folded open with the pages side by side. So we have our main display head here. We have our deck, which is the RUF Automobiles, Amazing Cars, Amazing Adventures. And then we have our byline, which is the photography and the story author. So usually for a feature article, the photography is taken strictly for the article itself, for the feature. So a lot of times, if it's photography or illustration, it's going to be displayed more formally with the byline at the beginning of the article. So these are the opening 2 pages of the article. And then we get to the jump spread, which is the continuing pages of the article. So in this case, we've got you know, columns of type for the story. We've got images, we've got captions, we've got our drop cap here. In a printed version, we've got folios, which is like the page numbers or markers at the bottom of the page that are in consistent locations on every page. And as we continue reading the story, we still follow the story in the column of type up here. We have another image with more captions. And then we have the Via Corsa's Patrick Ernzen sits down with Alios Ruff Jr. So this technically is our sidebar content for this story. We call sidebar content, technically it's alternate story forms. It can be a wide range of things in a sidebar. In this case, it's an interview with a person, driver. In some cases, it's an infographic. Sometimes it's a recipe. Sometimes it's a diagram of something, or timeline. You know, it can be, you know, alternate story forms or sidebars content can be a plethora of things. But basically a sidebar is something that's related to the story, but it has its own little section of the layout. and its own little identity, so to speak. I think I kind of compare it to an accessory to an outfit. So like if you're, putting together a suit or an outfit, it's an accessory or component that goes with everything, but it's its own little piece. So sometimes that helps people understand what a sidebar is. So this is kind of the print layout. So adapted to mobile here, we have the same exact components, but now we're working on a cell phone. So we've got one column here. We don't have multiple columns side by side. We've got a smaller amount of space and different formatting. So we're taking the same information and reformatting it to fit on a mobile phone or interface. So we've got the same nameplate here with the logo type. We have, this is technically the loading page here. This is the primary home page. So we have this is the feature story. So obviously it's going to be predominant or first on the page. These other stories with the thumbnail images, these represent the other cover lines that were on the print cover. And then we also have the nameplate here. We have a search and we have the secondary or hidden navigation. So if we were to click this, this is what would pop up with our secondary navigation. So obviously we can access the features from there as well. So if we scroll on down, if we were to click on the feature story, here's the feature story laid out again. This is the same opening image that we had in the print article, our print version. We still have this running headline, head plate at the top with the logo type, the search, and the hidden navigation. We've got our main display head, our deck, our byline, our drop cap. We've added the social media icons here. We have our same images and captions. And the interview here it's not enough room to really include the interview in the main layout here. So really on a mobile app, a lot of times the sidebar content will be on its own screen. So in this case, we've added a link. We call this a shirt tail or a tag, where we can click to link to the interview in this case, or the sidebar content. So this is scrolling. Obviously the content of the article is it's on a scrolling page. If we click on this, we get to the interview or the sidebar. So that's this screen here. So again, it's got its own title and we've got the question and answer in two different colors, the red and black. And then we have our main nameplate at the top with the search, our logo type, and our hidden navigation. So no matter where we are in the app, we can always search, we can always click on the nameplate to get back to the home page, and we can always access the secondary or hidden navigation. We can also click on this to get back to the story. So in the design of this, we've thought about all of these extensions. No matter where we are, we have this navigation in place. So this kind of gives you an idea here of how this carries over, So here's our print cover again. We're carrying the same logo type and the design elements of our brand from print to mobile over here on the right to the home page. The cover lines represent the thumbnail images and top stories in the issue on the primary navigation of the app. And these other stories, the feature article, is the sample article that I'm giving you that you'll choose from. The other stories you will just make up and find images for. Once we get to the opening spread of the feature article, again, we have the same architecture components for the editorial design here. We have the image, the display head, the deck head, the byline, photo credit, the drop cap, you know, there's always, you know, all of these things are carried over. And on the jump spread, same thing here. You know, here's our alternate story form with the interview laid out in the print magazine. Here we've linked to it and carried it over to its own screen. And obviously it's a scrolling page. So for the UI/UX, this is mainly what we'll be designing. We'll be designing this has extra credit, but this was a different year. We're designing this part of the project. But we'll have the phone screen with the logo here. So you can see, if I enlarge this or zoom in, you can see they've designed the icon. So it's just the initials, but you can see the same design element with the little pinstripe on the V. And then here's our loading page. Our home page, this is our primary navigation in number 3. And then if we click on the hamburger stack here, or the menu bars, the hidden navigation, that's what 2 is. And then we have the feature article with all its components and the alternate story form or the sidebar. And the story that I give you as the sample gives you all of these components. It labels it, it gives you choices for a pull quote, it gives you the sidebar content and what that's supposed to be, it gives you the main display head, the deck, the byline, it gives you all the information. You just have to lay it out in a different format. So it's really about, you know, I think this is basically what I just showed you. So this is really, you know, about thinking about every action and the result of that action. So you're not only, you know, you're designing the layout, but you're also designing how people are navigating from one thing to another. And I'm going to give you templates for the wireframing. So we're designing this for an iPhone, you know, Retina screen, 6, 7, or 8. We're just going to go with a moderate one because the 10s are really, the dimensions are a lot different. But you'll have this template to design the screens and what they look like. I'm also giving you a sheet that gives you scrolling pages for designing what that looks like. If you're planning on designing your pages as scrolling. A lot of students for the low fidelity prototyping or wireframing, they'll cut slits in the paper and feed the scrolling pages through. When you test this on people, it would be as if you were showing them, giving them a list of tasks and then having them run through those tasks without your help. So that's what this prototype testing example is. Now, granted, this is not the same thing we're creating. This is a different type of app. But I thought that this video was a good example of what low fidelity prototyping looks like, to give you an idea here.
Okay, so your task now is to open the My EE app.
Okay. I'll put my thumb on there. Cool. Nice. Nice.
And now your task is to register and log in.
Okay.
No computer task.
Yeah.
The next task is to remove the minutes tile from your home screen.
Okay. So, oh. Oh, that one. Cool.
Your next task is to place the add £10 top-up tile to your home screen.
Okay, cool. That's on top of the screen. Oh, back.
Well done. Your next task is to rearrange the tiles on your home screen as you see fit.
Okay. So let's. I use this all the time, so I want to move that. Can I move it to the top left? And then minutes allowed, smooth all data. Yeah, probably. Can I change these around? Not. These top ones. Okay. Top one. Oh, sorry. So changes. Cool.
Well done. You've completed.
Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of what low fidelity prototyping actually looks like on a mobile app. So obviously your mobile app is a little different. It's an editorial publication. So your tasks would be similar to, you would be asking them to access the feature article from the primary navigation or homepage, or the secondary navigation or hidden navigation in your app. And so based on the choices and how you design that, where they would click, what would be the action and the result of that action? How is that design affecting the navigation, and how does that lead people from one thing to another? And then once they get to the feature, then they access the sidebar content and then back to the home page. So that's really the only components that we're designing for your app. We're not, like I said, we're not doing the entire app here. So that's the main thing. But I want to give you, a mental picture here of what low fidelity prototyping actually looks like. As you can see, it's very raw, but it also allows you to understand if there's any confusion or pause in the actions and in the design of what you're doing, that, obviously the design needs to be better if there's any confusion at that stage. And you want to figure those things out at that stage, in the low fidelity prototyping stage, rather than after you've started digitally. It's much harder to backtrack at that point. So I don't want you to underestimate the importance of these initial phases of the project. This conceptualization stage, the research, the wireframing, all of this all of these things are extremely important in the entire process. This is where all the brain work is done. The digital design is just the icing on the cake, more or less. So I want you to be familiar with that. Now, like I said, before we had the pandemic, we did the print version as a major project. So I do want you to think about your, magazine brand being in print before the UIUX. This is a previous student work. So this was when we did the print component. So we usually did this first. And like I said, I'm going to give you a minor project that gives you some layout experience on the print magazine before we do the other. But this is when we had it as a major project. So we had, his concept for his magazine was modern rocker. So he did have a little graphic of the neck here. His cover lines here. The feature story in this case was ZZ Top's Billy Gibbons. It was a Billy Gibbons story about hot rods and food. And so that's the primary, that's the feature story of this particular issue, which he made a November issue. The other cover lines are representing other top stories in this issue as well. So this was the cover of the magazine itself. And then these pages were the layouts for the feature. So this is the opening spread, the first 2 pages of the feature article. So he made this a double page spread with the main display type, the deck, and the byline and photo credit here at the bottom. And then the jump spread, which is the continuing 2 pages of the article. So he had all of the parts of the architecture that we're including here. So we had the drop cap, obviously the columns of copy or the story itself. We had a couple of pull quotes, the Cuba, and this area in the colored background, that's the sidebar content in this case. It's a second little story that goes with the main story, but it's its own little section of the layout. And so that was the print component. We had to design the cover of the magazine and then the first 4 pages of the feature article. This isn't the whole article, it's just the first 4 pages. In the app, this is what it looked like. So how this converted over. So we had the phone screen, and he just took a screenshot of his own phone for this image here. And then he designed his icon. So again, you know, he just condensed his modern rocker down to just the initials, but he still included the neck of the guitar. And then he just added magazine underneath the pinstripe there. And we do still label underneath it as well on your phone. So we designed that page. And then here's the home page, primary navigation. So again, we got the we've got the Billy Gibbons story first, since that's the feature. We have the other stories that he just made up, and he provided thumbnails for those. And he included those on the primary navigation. And then the secondary navigation, he just replicated this screen to show the drop-down menu there. So if we were to click the hamburger stack, this next screen shows the drop-down menu here for that. So today's articles, which in this case, you know, you would probably want to include a list here to choose from. And, you know, there's some holes in this design, like he needed a search as well, which he didn't have. So it's always good to have a search in your options somewhere. But then we get to the feature article. So he's got the display head, the deck, the byline, the same opening image that he had in the print version. Same type, treatment, same typefaces, all the architecture is the same. It's just formatted to fit this, 1 column cell phone screen. And obviously he made the feature story a scrolling page. So you can see it's a little longer. The one thing he should have included are those other images. So in this print, he had 2 images here with some captions. He should have included those because, as you can see, it's just all copy. You definitely want some pictures within the feature article in the mobile app as well. You don't want to just always read all copy. It gets really boring. So you want an ebb and flow of images and type to break up the monotony there. But he's got the feature article. You can see he's got his pull quotes here. And here we call this a shirt tail in the graphic design world. But he created a little tag here to give us a little preview into the sidebar content or sidebar story for this article. We click to read more. So he gave that its own screen. So if we scroll on down to the next screen, Here's the sidebar content in its entirety. We can get back to the story, and we can also click on the icon here to get back to the main page, or the main primary homepage is what that would lead back to. So you can kind of see how this carries over from print to mobile. So before we go any further, are there any questions about what I've talked about so far?
I have a question, and this may be answered in like the information packet for the assignment. But I know you said we can kind of like pick, or like it's going to be like whichever issue that we choose. Does it matter? Like, does it have to be the month that we're in right now, or can we like make it a different month and kind of theme it to that season?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, you're making up the issue and the month, whatever that is. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And the magazine brand, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you can finish your point. I'll ask.
Well, what I was going to say is your magazine brand concept doesn't have to necessarily perfectly match the article that you choose. Like, for instance, one of the article choices is about winemaking or making red wine. So, I mean, that could be a food and beverage magazine. That could be a travel magazine. You have a lot of genres that could fit around that. So you have some wiggle room there. And I'm giving you 3 different articles to choose from. So you'll choose one of those to act as your feature story of the issue that you're producing. So what were you going to ask, Caroline?
You answered my question. It's okay.
Okay. And your research, I'm also giving you a sample or a template for your research as well. And the research is not due till April 5th. I'm giving you a full week to conduct your research because I really want you to have plenty of time to, study your competitors. The first initial step is choosing your feature article out of the samples, and then conceptualizing your brand of your magazine, figuring out what your brand of your magazine or what your magazine is going to be called. Okay. And you definitely want to think about your typefaces. We are limiting your typefaces again to 2, 3 max. In some cases, people will have their nameplate or logo type of their magazine, a certain typeface, and then they'll choose a serif and a sans serif to use for everything else that matches up with that. So that's typically what people do. But initially, after you do those 2 things, you're going to start researching magazines. And so one way, I'm giving you the template for that. So your research template is going to look something like this. So the first, you only have to have, most of it can be bullets and listed, but the first 2 paragraphs are just outlining the chosen article out of the samples provided and the name that you have conceptualized for your magazine, where the article will be placed, and talking about that. And then the first major part of the research is your competitive research. So you want to find magazines that are out there already that kind of do the same thing you want to do with your magazine. So if you're a food and beverage magazine, what are other food and beverage magazines that would be your competitors on a newsstand? Research their logos, their typefaces, colors, their fonts, think about their stakeholders. So for your stakeholders, what I want, most people are kind of confused with what stakeholders are. So a stakeholder is anybody that would care about what you're doing, anybody that would care about the magazine that you're producing. So I do want you to interview 2 stakeholders and, question, what do they find useful in the magazines they read? What What magazines do they read? And if they use magazine apps, what do they use? What could they improve about the navigation? What do they find useful? What do they find problematic? Because this is going to give you the information that you need to create a persona, which is technically fictitious, a group of fictitious people who, but they represent your key users or readers or customers. So that's going to help you illustrate their unique desires and motivations with regards to your magazine. You want to understand your demographic, in other words. That's what the human-centered design component is all about here. You want to understand their goals, their habits, their behavior, their motivations, all of that stuff. And then the second part of the research is creating, it kind of relates more to the UI/UX. It's more about a use case scenario. In other words, outlining how the user or reader is interacting with the print and app navigational options that you're creating. In this case, it's really about the app navigational options. So when you're creating a use case scenario, it's basically identifying, who is reading the magazine or using your magazine app, defining what they want to do in the app. In this case, it's finding the feature from the primary navigation and the secondary navigation, leading to the feature, and then back to the home page. But it's also including all of those extensions along the way. So again, you've got to think about the action and every result of that action that they take. And then the final part of your research is just providing one paragraph at the end that summarizes your findings. So I'm giving you this template for your research, and that will be included in the assignment, with the assignment in Blackboard. And as you start researching magazines, obviously look for printed magazines that you find out there, but you can also find, if you look at digital websites of magazines, in this case, I've threw a couple of links your way that I'm putting with the assignment, but you can look up any magazine. The Bitter Southerner here, they're a digital magazine. So this is their website. But to get an idea of what a mobile app version of this magazine would look like, you would just narrow your browser screen as far as it would go. And that's going to give you the mobile app view of what that would look like. So obviously we see the display head, and logo type of the magazine. We've got the hidden navigation here. Here it goes. Well, if it'll let me. Let me try taste. So this is another one called tastecooking.com. So this is a food magazine. There we go. Now we can access the hidden navigation here. So they've got their features, different types of options here. So if we hover over the plus sign, we get all the different columns that are, I guess, current columns that are every issue, all their different issues. If we click on the plus sign here, it just categorizes their feature articles into categories like cooking and culture. So if we go to both of these, we'll have the feature stories of this issue under these categories. So you'll decide what those options are for your magazine. And then this is the primary navigation. Let me see if I can, yeah, that's as far as it'll go. So obviously, here's the primary navigation. Okay, so this is the feature article here, 300% more chili crisps. So what to buy, cook, and read to find your next favorite jar. And then, so they've got a basic, supporting image here. This is in the cooking category. The title, kind of a little lead into what it's about, and then who wrote it. Here's the other stories that are in this issue under culture, and so on. So this is definitely a scrolling page for the primary navigation. But if we click on this story, this is the feature article here. But again, we've got the same components in architecture here. We've got our main display head, our byline, our deck here, our drop cap, our type, body copy. And then these underlined, in this case, these underlined options here, these all lead to sidebar content. You know, most of these are based off on other products, recipes, you know, things like that. So if we click on, you know, this noodle soup, then it would lead us to their page to find their recipes and so on. So all of the, you know, architecture is there. And then we still have the nameplate. So if we click on that, we get back to the home page. And we have a search, and obviously we have our secondary menu. So no matter where we are in the app, we always have those options. So even if we click on any story, we have those options no matter where we are in the app. So if you narrow your browser screen, you can get a good visual of what the mobile app version would look like. If we extend this out, it's a little bit different. You can see our menu changes. Instead of having a drop-down menu with a hamburger stack, we have our secondary menu just listed up here. So this is the website view when we have it extended in the total width of the page. So this kind of gives you an idea. You know, I pulled up some issue.com magazines too, to show you, you know, again, the same parts of the architecture with editorial feature stories. You know, with any type of magazine, we still have a consistent, you know, parts of the architecture: main display head, deck, byline, drop cap. You know, our story starts in the column here, carries on through the jump spread. And then this getting social with Nova Dog, this particular information here, which is, you know, the different people showing their senior dogs and a little, you know, bio underneath them. That's the sidebar content for this particular article. So it has its own section in the layout, but it is related to the main feature. And you can see that in the design.